Hey, it's Tracy. Last year, my dad kicked me out, laughed when I said I could make it on my own. But now, he's begging outside my gate. How did I go from being the family's punching bag to finally taking control? You wouldn't believe the lies, the betrayal. But trust me, what happened next is something you won't see coming. What did I really lose? And what did I finally gain? Stick around, because this story isn't over yet. I stood at the door, the weight of my suitcase pressing down on my hand like a cruel reminder. The door was wide open, my father's figure in the doorway, looking down at me as if I was a stranger, a burden. His laughter echoed through the room, a bitter, hollow sound that churned my stomach. "You think you can just walk out of here, Tracy?" He shook his head as if I'd lost my mind. "After all these years of you doing nothing but taking advantage of me? You think you've got what it takes to make it on your own?" My heart was beating hard in my chest. How had we come to this? How had a lifetime of sacrifice and care, a lifetime of giving everything, come down to this one cruel moment? "Get out," he said, his words sharp like daggers. "It's time you learned what real life is about." The door slammed shut behind me, the finality of it reverberating through my body. I stood there, stunned, for a long while. The echo of his words played in my head over and over. "Get out!" As if I hadn't already been living on the edge of my own existence for years, invisible, underappreciated. But to hear it, to have my own father tell me that I didn't matter, that I wasn't wanted, there was something about hearing it out loud that twisted deep inside me. For a moment, I wanted to collapse. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but instead, I just stood there. I thought of all the years I had spent taking care of them, of him. The nights I stayed up late, nursing my siblings through their troubles, always putting their needs ahead of my own. I thought of the countless times I'd given up my own dreams, my own life, to make sure they didn't have to face the consequences of their actions. I had done everything, but to him, to all of them, I was nothing. I was the one who cleaned up their messes, the one who was expected to endure. "I gave everything, but you saw me as nothing," I whispered to myself, feeling the weight of those words in my soul. I had given my heart, my time, my love, and they had never seen me, never seen the person behind the caretaker. I turned away from the door, my thoughts racing. I couldn't go back. Not now, not after what had happened. I left the house, not looking back. The world outside felt like a blur as I walked down the street, carrying nothing but my thoughts and the bitter taste of rejection. My father's laugh still echoed in my ears, like a sick joke. How could he? How could they all just discard me like that? I had never been good enough, not for them, not for anyone. The weight of my life had always been on my shoulders, and now, with no home, no place to go, it felt heavier than ever. I thought back to the years I spent taking care of everything, fixing broken relationships, making sure everyone had what they needed while I put myself last. But no one ever thanked me. No one ever saw the sacrifices I made. My siblings, especially the younger ones, had never understood. They'd always been too busy with their own lives, too caught up in their own problems to notice mine. And my father? He'd never been satisfied, always pushing for more, expecting perfection, but never offering love, never offering any kind of real recognition. And then, there it was. The final blow. The moment that had been coming for so long. I stood outside in the street, taking a deep breath, and then I felt it, a surge of determination. I would not let this be the end of me. I had spent so many years living for them, for their approval, their validation. I had been nothing more than a servant to their needs, a shadow in their lives, but no more. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't go back. I had to live for me now. I pulled out my phone, taking a deep breath, and called a local real estate agent. I had no idea where I was going to get the money for an apartment, but I knew one thing. I was going to find a way. "I'll show them," I whispered to myself, the words feeling like a promise. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval, their support. I just needed my own strength. I hung up the phone, looking out over the street. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance, a real chance to start over, to prove to myself that I could make it on my own. But just as I was about to turn and walk down the street, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, not recognizing the number, but something about it felt familiar. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Tracy? The voice on the other end made my heart skip a beat. It was my father. I need your help, he said, his tone surprisingly softer than I expected. I felt my stomach tighten. Help? After everything he'd just done to me? I stood frozen for a moment, the phone pressed to my ear. Could I help him? Should I help him? He had never asked for my help before. And after everything, after all the years of him treating me like I didn't matter, did I even owe him anything? The question gnawed at me, but I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I stared at the phone, the decision hanging in the air. Did I owe him this time, or had I finally learned to say no? The morning light crept through the thin curtains of my new apartment, a small but cozy space that smelled faintly of fresh paint and uncertainty. I sat up in bed, still groggy, trying to process the fact that I was finally free. Free from the constant tension of my family home, free from their expectations, and free from the weight of years spent living for everyone else. But with that freedom came a heavy silence, a quiet that felt louder than any argument ever could. The absence of the familiar hum of my father's voice, the clinking of dishes, the sound of my siblings arguing. It was all gone, and in its place was a kind of loneliness that sat in the pit of my stomach. I wrapped my arms around my knees and stared out of the window. It wasn't much, just a small apartment in a building tucked away from the hustle of the city, but it was mine. I had taken the first step. But then the reality hit, the silence, the emptiness. For the first time in a long time, it was just me. And no one to lean on, no one to ask for help. I had always been the one people turned to, the one who put everyone else first. But now, I had nothing but my own reflection to face. I thought back to the night I left. I had packed my things in the dead of night, moving as quietly as I could, trying not to wake anyone. The house had felt suffocating, like a cage I couldn't escape from fast enough. But now that I was out, the freedom felt like a double-edged sword. For years, I had been the caretaker. I had been the one to keep everything running smoothly. I'd been the one to pick up the pieces when my father fell apart, when my siblings couldn't handle their own lives. I had done it all, and yet I was still nothing more than a ghost to them. For once, it's all on me. And that's terrifying, I muttered aloud, my voice thick with frustration. But maybe, just maybe, it's my time. I spent the morning unpacking my things, trying to keep myself busy. There were moments when the weight of it all felt like it might crush me, but I kept moving, slowly, methodically. I refused to stop because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant drowning in the past. I unpacked the few clothes I had managed to bring with me, folding them neatly and placing them in the closet. I didn't have much, but what I did have was mine. The way the closet door creaked when I closed it, the way the kitchen floor was cool beneath my bare feet, it all felt so foreign, but it also felt like a fresh start. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years, my old boss. It was time to find work, time to find something to do that didn't involve cleaning up after everyone else. I'm ready, I whispered to myself as the phone rang. I'm ready to live for me. The call was quick. An interview was scheduled for next week. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The phone buzzed in my hand, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see a message from one of my friends, but it was my younger sibling, the one who had always mocked my decisions. Hey, you still alive? The message read. I stared at it for a moment, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. How could they just text me like everything was fine? After everything. I took a deep breath and replied, my fingers shaking as I typed. Yeah, still alive, living my life now. The response came quickly, full of sarcasm. Sure you are. You always were so good at pretending. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. The nerve of them. After everything I'd done, after all the sacrifices, they still saw me as nothing more than the one who cleaned up their messes. I didn't respond, but the words haunted me. You've always been so naive. But I wasn't naive anymore. I wasn't the same person I used to be. Later that evening, I sat on the couch in the dim light of my apartment, the phone still buzzing in my hand. Once my fingers hovered over the keys, unsure of what to do. I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to let them pull me back into their mess. And then the doorbell rang. I froze. Who could it be? I opened the door slowly, and there he was, my younger sibling, standing on the other side with that same condescending look, like they had all the answers. You really think you can make it, Tracy? They sneered, arms crossed. You've always been so naive. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a moment of silence, the air thick with tension. But I didn't back down. I didn't flinch. You're not the one who's been carrying this family all these years, I said quietly, but firmly. It's time for me to carry myself. They laughed bitterly. You'll never make it. You've always needed someone. The words stung, but they didn't have the power they once had, because this time it was different. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small again. Not ever. After they left, I sat on the couch, my hands trembling as I held my phone. The reality of what I had just done was sinking in. I had stood up for myself. I had made the decision to walk away, to live on my terms. But now, in the quiet of my apartment, doubt started to creep in. Was I doing the right thing? Could I really make it on my own? Just as I was starting to spiral, a letter slipped through the door. I opened it slowly, the familiar handwriting on the envelope making my heart skip a beat. It was from my father. I need your help, the letter read. I'm in trouble. Please, Tracy, I don't know who else to turn to. The words hit me like a wave, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. He needed me. After everything he had done, after everything he had put me through, he needed me. I stared at the letter for a long time, my mind racing. Did I owe him? Was this the time to show mercy? Or had I finally learned to say no? I looked at my phone, the silence between us growing louder. Did I help him? Or did I stay firm in my decision? The days bled into one another as I sat at the small table in my new apartment, staring at the walls that seemed to be closing in. It was early in the morning, but already I could feel the weight of the day press against me, the weight of the past, the family I had walked away from, the life I was supposed to have but never did. I ran my fingers through my hair and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same woman who had left her family home just a few days ago. This woman was stronger. She had survived years of being pushed aside, years of sacrificing herself for everyone else's happiness. But now she was finally free. I'd finally stepped into a life that was mine, a life I could control. And yet, the loneliness. It wasn't something I was prepared for. I hadn't realized how much of myself had been bound up in the family I'd left behind. The silence of my new apartment made everything seem so much louder. The echo of my father's laughter, the constant bickering from my siblings, the helplessness that had hung in the air for so long, it was all gone. I was alone, and that made me feel a little small. But then I reminded myself, this was my decision. This was my choice. I spent the next few hours unpacking and trying to make this place feel like home. There were little things, arranging books on a shelf, setting my favorite mug by the sink, but every small action made me feel more grounded, more in control. Still, there were moments, quiet moments, when doubt crept in. I'd catch myself wishing that I wasn't alone, that I could call someone, ask for help, lean on them like I always had. But the truth was, I didn't have anyone left. I didn't have a family to turn to. The phone rang, and my heart leapt in my chest. I grabbed it quickly, hoping for a call that would somehow change everything. It was a friend from my past, someone who had always been there for me, even if from afar. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe even years. "Tracy, it's been a while. I've been thinking about you. How's everything going?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "I'm getting by. A lot has changed, but I'm okay." We agreed to meet for coffee. It felt good to talk to someone who wasn't family, someone who didn't have an agenda. They didn't need anything from me. We could just talk. We met at a small cafe downtown, a quiet spot where we used to sit for hours, sipping coffee and talking about life. As we sat across from each other, the conversation quickly turned to my family. "You know, Tracy," my friend said softly, stirring their coffee, "sometimes we have to let go of what holds us back, even if it's family. I know that's a tough pill to swallow, but distance is sometimes what we need to grow." I felt a twinge of guilt, but also relief. Maybe this really was what I needed. I hadn't considered that before. Maybe, just maybe, I'd spent so many years trying to hold on to a broken family that I'd forgotten how to hold on to myself. "I know," I replied, my voice steady, but filled with an emotion I hadn't expected. "I feel like I'm starting over, and it's scary." "Of course it's scary," they said. "But you're doing the right thing. You've given them enough." Later that evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the sound of the city outside my window distant but constant. I picked up the letter from my father that had been sitting on the table all day. I had been avoiding it, afraid of what it might say, afraid of the weight it might carry. I opened it slowly. The words inside were familiar, but they felt different now. "I'm sorry, Tracy. I never knew how much I hurt you. I don't know if I can ever make it right." I read the words again, then a third time. Was it an apology? It didn't feel like one. It felt hollow, like he was saying what he thought I wanted to hear rather than acknowledging the damage he'd caused. But for the first time, it didn't matter. I was done trying to fix him, trying to fix everything for him. "I've spent my life proving my worth to others," I whispered, sitting back in my chair, "but I've never asked myself what I'm worth to myself." I placed the letter back down, the weight of it suddenly insignificant. I had spent so many years looking for validation from a family that would never give it to me. But that was about to change. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done. Done with the family who had never appreciated me. Done with the years of sacrifice, the years of trying to prove myself. I wasn't going to keep waiting for them to love me. I was going to live for me. I picked up the phone and dialed my father's number. When he answered, I didn't hesitate. "I've always given everything, but it's time I start living for me," I said firmly. There was a long pause on the other end. "Tracy," he said, his voice thick with confusion. "What are you talking about? You can't just leave us. We're family." "I am family," I replied, my voice shaking but strong. "But I've always been the one to fix everything for you. And I'm done. I'm not going to keep sacrificing my life for you anymore." There was a stunned silence before he spoke again. "You think you can just walk away from us?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I had just said. "Yes, I do." Later that night, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my father. This one wasn't a letter. It was a demand, a plea. "You've broken this family, Tracy. You need to come back. You have to fix this." I stared at the message, the words burning in my chest. I knew deep down what I had to do, but the pull of the past was still there. The weight of years of sacrifice, the years of always being the one to fix things, it was hard to ignore. But as I read the message again, I knew one thing for sure. If I went back, I would lose everything I had just gained. I couldn't do that. The message sat there on my phone, demanding that I come back and undo the damage. But I knew, if I returned, I'd lose myself all over again. I sat there, holding the letter in my hands. The ink on the paper blurred slightly from the tears I hadn't meant to shed. My father's words were not unfamiliar, but they felt like they were coming from someone else, someone I didn't recognize. The apology, though perhaps sincere, seemed too little, too late. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to fix things, trying to be the one who held the family together. But I wasn't that person anymore. For too long, silence had been my weapon. I had allowed myself to be silent, to keep my feelings bottled up, thinking it was the right thing to do. The family had always depended on me being quiet, patient, the one who cleaned up everyone's mess. But no more. That silence had kept me prisoner in my own life, and now it was time to break free. I stood up and looked out the window, my mind racing. My father's words echoed in my head, but this time, they didn't make me feel small. They didn't make me feel helpless. The anger was still there, but it was no longer a source of shame. It was a source of strength. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront him, face to face. No more hiding behind letters, no more indirect communication. I had to say what needed to be said. I dialed his number. The phone rang once, then twice, and on the third ring, I heard his voice. "Tracy, what is it now?" His tone was as cold as I remembered, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Desperation, guilt. I couldn't tell. "I'm done, Dad. I'm done playing this game where I'm the one who holds everything together. I'm not doing it anymore." His voice faltered for just a moment. "You're breaking up the family, Tracy. You can't just walk away. You're tearing us apart." I clenched my teeth. "I've heard that all my life, Dad. I'm not the one holding this family back anymore. You've done that all on your own. I'm living my life now, for myself." There was a long silence on the other end. "Then," he said, his voice rising in frustration, "you need to come back. You're the only one who can fix this. You're all I've got left." I stood firm, my voice unwavering. "No, Dad, I'm not coming back. Not this time. I'm not fixing this for you. It's your mess, and you need to deal with it. I'm done." The power in the conversation shifted, from him to me. For the first time, I wasn't being manipulated. I wasn't the one apologizing, the one making amends for things I hadn't done. This time, I was standing up for myself. The next day, I spent hours preparing for the inevitable confrontation. It wasn't just a matter of confronting him. It was a matter of confronting myself. I'd always been the one to take the fall, the one to smooth over the cracks in the family. But that had to stop. This wasn't just about him. It was about me. I went over the conversation in my head 100 times. What would I say? How would I say it? Should I apologize for leaving? No. I wasn't going to apologize. Not anymore. I stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath. The woman staring back at me was someone I barely recognized. She was stronger than the person I used to be. She was someone who had survived everything. Years of self-doubt, years of sacrificing for a family that never truly appreciated her. But now, she was going to do things her way. The drive to my father's house was quiet, too quiet. The road was long and winding, and I couldn't help but think about all the years I'd spent here, growing up in that house. I'd spent my life there, trying to make everyone happy, trying to fix the pieces of a broken family that never seemed to want to be fixed. When I arrived, the house felt smaller somehow, as if it had lost its power over me. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, my father stood there, his face hard, his eyes cold. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like I was some stranger who had no right to be there. "I'm here," I said, my voice steady. "We need to talk." He stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The air in the house felt thick, like the walls were closing in on me. I had spent so many years trying to keep everything from falling apart, and now, here we were, on the edge. I couldn't hide anymore. "You really think you can just leave?" My father's voice was low, almost a growl. "You're making a huge mistake, Tracy. We need you." I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I didn't just leave, Dad. I chose to live for myself. For once, I'm not your emotional punching bag anymore." His face twisted with anger. "You're selfish. You're abandoning us when we need you the most." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm saving myself. And that's something I've never done before." The anger in his eyes flared, but I didn't back down. I was done being the one who always apologized, the one who always caved in. This time, I was standing up for me. As I turned to leave, his voice called out after me. "You'll regret this, Tracy. You can't live your life without us. You'll never be happy without the family." I paused at the door, my hand resting on the knob. His words echoed in my mind, but this time, they didn't have the power to break me. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. I don't regret this. I can't keep living for other people. I have to live for me. With that, I stepped out of the house, the door closing behind me, and walked away. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still pulling me back. Family was a heavy thing to let go of. Even when it's broken, even when it hurts, there's still a part of you that wants to go back. But I couldn't go back. Not this time. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the crumpled letter in my hand. My father's words had been so easy to ignore before, but now they seemed to weigh on me. "I'm sorry," he'd written, "but I don't know how to fix what I've broken." I had spent years trying to make him understand, trying to prove that I wasn't just some silent daughter. But now, his apology felt hollow. Too little, too late. I let out a slow breath. This wasn't about his apology anymore. This was about me. All my life, I had played the role of the dutiful daughter, always putting my family's needs first. But what did that get me? A lifetime of resentment, self-doubt, and emotional manipulation. Every time I let them, I just shrunk into a shadow of who I could be. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't going to let this family continue to define who I was. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was him. My father. His name flashed on the screen, and my stomach twisted into knots. But this time, I wasn't afraid to answer. I wasn't afraid to speak my truth. "Tracy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Why are you doing this? Why are you tearing this family apart? You know we need you." The familiar guilt washed over me, but I held it back. I had heard this 1,000 times before. "I'm not tearing the family apart, Dad. I'm saving myself. For once, I'm living for me." "You've always been too proud for your own good," he snapped. "You're just like your mother, never satisfied, always wanting more." My chest tightened. The mention of my mother was a cheap shot, a manipulation tactic, just like always. But this time, I wouldn't let him use it against me. "No," I said firmly, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "I'm not like her, and I'm not like you either. I've spent my whole life sacrificing for everyone else, And what do I have to show for it? Nothing. I'm done. His silence on the other end was deafening. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fill it with excuses or apologies. I just let the silence hang between us, heavy and final. The family dinner came a few days later. I knew it would be the moment of reckoning. I had been dreading it, but I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to stand up for myself, in front of everyone, including my father. When I walked into the dining room, the air was thick with unspoken tension. My siblings sat around the table, their faces stiff. I could feel their judgment before they even said a word. My father didn't bother with a greeting. He just glared at me, his eyes full of disappointment. "You've always been too proud for your own good, Tracy," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You're just like your mother, never satisfied, always wanting more." His words hit me like a slap, but this time, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I stood tall, not backing down. "I'm not like her," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I've spent my life trying to keep this family together, doing everything for everyone else. And what has it gotten me? Nothing but pain and heartache." "You've always been selfish, Tracy," my younger brother chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Why can't you just be happy with what you have?" I stared at him, my hands clenched at my sides. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not living for you anymore. I'm living for me, and I won't apologize for that." My father's face turned red with anger, but there was something else in his eyes too. Fear. He was afraid of losing control over me, afraid of the truth I was finally speaking. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll regret this." But I didn't care. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I was a woman who had been suffocated by the weight of my family's expectations for too long. After the dinner, I took a long walk, needing time to clear my head. The confrontation had been both freeing and draining. My body felt heavy, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I had finally stood up for myself, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But I wasn't sure what would come next. As I walked, I reflected on the years I had spent trying to fix everything and everyone. I had spent my life trying to be the good daughter, the obedient one, but no more. It was time to start living for me. I knew I couldn't go back to the way things had been. The cycle of guilt, manipulation, and silent suffering had to end. I couldn't keep making excuses for my family's behavior. They had treated me like I was invisible, and I had allowed it. But no more. I had a life to live, a life that didn't revolve around them. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, my phone buzzing with missed calls from my father. His messages were full of desperation, guilt, and manipulation, but I didn't answer. For the first time, I ignored his calls. I knew he was trying to pull me back into his world, but I wasn't going to let him. Not anymore. I stood up, looking out the window at the city lights. The silence in my apartment was deafening, but it felt like peace. A peace I had never known before. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking toward my future. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. The stillness of my apartment was unnerving. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter my father had sent. The words now burned into my mind. After all the years of silence, the guilt trips, and the emotional manipulation, I could almost hear his voice in my head. But this time, it didn't faze me. This time, I was done. I had spent so long being the obedient daughter, swallowing my anger, burying my needs for the sake of keeping the peace. But as I sat there, the weight of those years felt lighter. The anger still simmered, but beneath it was something else, something more empowering. I had a right to live for myself, to stand up for my peace. The question was, could I really walk away from everything? I took a deep breath and stared at the walls of my empty apartment. The silence that once felt suffocating was now a source of strength. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't invisible. It was time to face them all. Face my family, face my father, and confront the years of pain they had caused. I wasn't going to hide in silence any longer. Not today, not ever again. The family dinner was a few days later. I knew what I was walking into, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm that awaited. My father's house, the place I had spent so many years trying to escape, was filled with the tension I had longed to avoid. My siblings were already there, quiet and watchful. The moment I stepped in, I could feel their eyes on me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "You think you're better than us now?" My father's voice cut through the silence like a knife. He was sitting at the head of the table, his usual air of authority now replaced with something darker, a mixture of contempt and confusion. "After everything we've done for you?" I stood there, fists clenched at my sides, taking in every word. His attempt to guilt-trip me again was no surprise. This was the same manipulation, the same toxic cycle I had been running from for years, but this time it didn't sting. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not better than you. I'm just done playing this game. I'm done being the one who always has to sacrifice." His face reddened, and I could see the anger boiling beneath his calm exterior. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't that little girl anymore, cowering in silence. "You're just like your mother," he continued, his voice sharp, trying to pull the same trick again. "Selfish, never satisfied, always wanting more." The mention of my mother was a low blow. I could feel the familiar sting, but I wasn't going to let it control me. Not this time. "No," I said again, my voice firm. "I'm not like her. I'm not like you either. I've been taking care of everyone else for so long, I forgot what it feels like to take care of myself." "You'll regret this," he said, trying to back me into a corner. "You can't live your life without us. You need us." The old Tracy would have caved, would have apologized for being strong, for standing up for myself. But not now. Now I felt a fire inside me, a force I'd never felt before. "No, Dad," I said. "I don't need you to tell me who I am anymore. I've spent my life trying to please you, and I've lost myself in the process. I'm done." The room fell silent. My siblings exchanged looks, unsure of what to say. I could feel the shift in the air. I was no longer the quiet, obedient daughter. I was someone else now. I left the dinner that night feeling lighter, but there was a small knot in my stomach. It wasn't over. The battle had only just begun. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotion. I spent hours thinking about the conversation with my father, wondering if I had done the right thing. It felt like I had crossed a line, a point of no return. But even though I was scared, I knew in my bones that it was the right choice. I couldn't keep living in the shadows of their expectations. The phone rang again, the familiar number flashing on the screen. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. This time, I was in control. I stood by the window in my apartment, watching the city outside. The world felt vast, full of possibilities. It was quiet now, but I knew the storm was far from over. I had broken the silence, and now I had to face the consequences. As I stared at the phone, it buzzed with another missed call from my father. The messages kept coming, desperate pleas for me to return, for me to come back and fix what I had broken. But I was no longer the person who would bend under the weight of those words. I was strong now. I knew I had been fighting for so long, trying to keep a family together that was never meant to stay that way. I had fought for their approval, for their love, for their recognition. But not anymore. I was done playing the martyr. I took a final look at my phone. I didn't need to hear his voice. I didn't need to be part of that world anymore. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking toward my future. If cutting them off meant I got to find peace, then that's what I would do. I sat in my apartment, the silence pressing in on me like a thick fog. The weight of everything I had done, the decisions, the confrontations, was still settling. I had finally cut the ties that had bound me to my family, but the truth was, the consequences were just beginning to unfold. I thought back to the moment when I'd stood up to my father, to the words I'd said. "I'm done playing this game. I'm done letting you control me." Those words still echoed in my head. There was no going back now. I had chosen this path, and with it came the uncertainty of what would happen next. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing you have to jump, but not knowing if the ground below will catch you. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but feel something else stirring inside me, a sense of power I had never known before. I had spent my entire life trying to make everyone else happy, trying to prove myself worthy of their love and approval. Now, I was choosing to live for me. I wasn't asking for their approval anymore, and that realization alone was enough to make me stand taller. The phone rang again, and I ignored it. I knew it was him, my father. His calls had been relentless ever since the dinner. Each time, I felt the pull to pick up, to go back, to somehow fix things. But that pull had grown weaker with every missed call. I had done enough, sacrificed enough. It was time for me to live my life, to put myself first. But that wasn't how my family saw it. No. To them, I was the one who was ungrateful, selfish even. They'd twisted the narrative, painted me as the villain for wanting to break free. I had become the scapegoat for everything that was wrong in their world. "You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness," my father had said, his words searing into me. "You'll regret this one day." And as much as it hurt to hear, I knew it was true. I would regret nothing, not this time. I had to make this stand, even if it meant losing them forever. The family gathering that followed was a powder keg waiting to explode. I knew the moment I walked in, the air would shift. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My father's eyes narrowed as he saw me, the disappointment radiating off him like a dark cloud. "You think you're better than us now?" he spat, his voice dripping with anger. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I could feel the familiar sting of shame, the urge to apologize, to make it right, but I pushed it down. I wasn't that person anymore. "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not better than you. I'm just done. I'm not playing the game anymore. I'm done being the one who carries everyone else's weight." The room fell silent. My siblings exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. I could feel their judgment, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not anymore. "You've always been too proud for your own good," my father continued, trying to guilt-trip me. "Just like your mother, never satisfied, always wanting more." At that moment, something inside me snapped. He had crossed a line, trying to use my mother as a weapon against me. For years, I had let him get away with it. Not anymore. "No," I said, my voice growing louder. "I'm not like her, and I'm not like you. I've been trying to please you all my life. I've been the good daughter, the obedient one, but you never let me be me." He looked at me with confusion, his anger shifting into desperation. "You're making a mistake, Tracy. You'll regret this." I shook my head. "No, Dad, I'm not regretting this. I'm finally free." That night, as I walked out of that house, I felt lighter. But it was a bitter freedom, because I knew the consequences of my actions would come crashing down soon enough, and they did. The next morning, I found a letter from my father. It was a legal notice, stating that my share of the family estate had been seized. I wasn't surprised. This was the game they played, the same manipulation, the same tactics. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. "I'm going to fight this," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let them take everything from me." It felt like the first real fight I'd ever been in, and for the first time in my life, I felt ready. A few days later, the calls from my father continued, each one more desperate than the last. But I didn't pick up. I was done being the emotional crutch for a family that had never given me anything in return. They didn't care about me. They cared about control. I had learned that the hard way, but now I was ready for whatever came next. If they wanted a war, I was prepared to give it to them. But this time, I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was fighting for myself. If they want a war, I thought, I'll give them one. But this time, I fight with everything I have. The sound of the clock ticking in the quiet room was the only thing I could hear. I sat there in my apartment, reflecting on how far I'd come. The struggle, the pain, the heartbreak. Everything had led me to this moment, the moment that would define my future. The path was clear now. I had finally found my strength, and I wasn't going to let anyone or anything take that away. I've been silent for too long, I thought, my fingers tightening around the papers in front of me. But I'm done being a pawn in their game. I had fought to get here, fought to stand on my own 2 feet, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The weight of the last few months, all the manipulation and betrayal, had led me to this final battle. My father, my family, they thought they could break me, but they didn't realize who they were dealing with now. I had become something else, stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. I stood up and grabbed my coat. It was time to take control, to finally fight back in the way I should have years ago. I wasn't going to let them continue to rule my life. The courtroom was cold and sterile, but my resolve was warm, a fire burning deep within me. I could feel the tension building as I walked through the doors. The time for playing by their rules was over. This was my time to take back what was rightfully mine. I wasn't just fighting for my assets, for my reputation. I was fighting for my soul, for my peace. As I took my seat, I caught sight of my father, sitting across the room. His face was grim, eyes narrowed, but I could see the fear lurking beneath the surface. He didn't expect this. He never thought I'd actually do it. But here I was, taking a stand, not backing down. The trial began, and it was just as I'd feared. They tried to twist everything, turn it against me. My father stood there, speaking his lies, trying to paint me as the villain in this story. But I wouldn't let it happen. When it was my turn, I walked up to the stand with steady feet, my heart pounding, but my voice unwavering. "This isn't about money," I said, meeting my father's gaze directly. "It's about respect. I'm taking back what's mine." The courtroom went quiet. I could feel the weight of the moment, the one that would change everything. I'd never felt more in control, more empowered, than I did right then. And then, I dropped the bombshell. I revealed the evidence, documents proving that my father's actions were illegal, that he had been siphoning off funds and assets, manipulating the entire family for his own benefit. I could see the shock on his face, the disbelief. He hadn't expected me to fight back like this. He hadn't expected me to win. But of course, my family wasn't going to give up that easily. As the trial progressed, they escalated their tactics. My father, my siblings, they tried everything they could to break me. Then came the call from my sister. "You don't have to do this, Tracy," she begged, her voice trembling. "You're hurting us all for what? Money? Is it really worth it?" I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was just caught in the middle, that she didn't mean the things she was saying. But deep down, I knew. I knew she wasn't on my side. And then she said it. I've been working with Dad this whole time, Tracy. I never wanted this to go public, but you left me no choice. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. My own sister, the one person I thought would have my back, had been helping him sabotage me the whole time. She had turned against me, just like the rest of them. There was no one left to trust. That was it. That was the moment. I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the manipulation. I didn't need them. Not anymore. I called her out, right there in front of the family, in front of everyone who had ever doubted me, ever tried to control me. You've made your choice, I said, my voice steady, firm. And I've made mine. I'm done being your scapegoat. Her face turned white, and for a moment I could see the guilt and regret in her eyes. But it didn't matter. She had made her choice. And I had made mine. The legal battle raged on, but it was clear that I was winning. I had the evidence, I had the support, and most importantly, I had my voice. But as much as I had fought for this moment, I knew the real battle was still ahead. I thought I had won, but as I walked out of the courtroom, feeling a rush of victory, I got a tip from an anonymous source. My father wasn't done yet. He had a plan that could destroy everything I'd worked for. For a second, the weight of it all hit me. I'd won this round, but the war was far from over. I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. This fight isn't over, I thought, clenching my fists. It's just beginning. The weight of everything I'd been through pressed down on me as I stood by my window, watching the sun begin to set over the city. The skyline glowed in the fading light, the world outside still moving, but inside, I was at a crossroads. I thought back to the first day I walked into that courtroom, the first time I stood up for myself. I had no idea it would come to this, but here I was, standing at the edge of everything. This was the moment I'd been fighting for, and it was mine to take. I've been silent for too long, I whispered to myself, my hand gripping the windowsill. But I'm done being a pawn in their game. It's time to finish what I started. I turned away from the window and walked to the table where the legal papers sat, ready to be signed. This was it. The final step in taking control of my life. I had endured betrayal, manipulation, and deceit from those I trusted the most, but no longer. This was my fight, and I was going to win it. But even as I stood there, preparing myself for the final confrontation, something lingered. My father had sent one last message, cryptic and threatening. He had his plans, but I had mine. Whatever he thought he could do to stop me, I was ready. This battle was mine to win, and nothing would hold me back. The day I faced my father in person again was different from all the other times. There was no fear in me anymore, no hesitation. This was the last time I would confront the man who had broken me for so long. I met him in a small, private room, just the two of us. The years of resentment, of silent suffering, flooded over me. But I stayed calm. I wasn't here to fight with him. I was here to take back what was mine. You stole from me, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. And now you're trying to take my soul. But I'm done being your puppet. He didn't react at first. Then he spoke, his voice low, but there was something in it I hadn't expected. Truth. I never had control over it, Tracy, he admitted, his eyes meeting mine for the first time with something that looked like remorse. The wealth, the business, it was never really mine to control. It was built on stolen foundations, and I've been trying to hold on to it ever since, but I've lost everything. The words hit me hard, but in a way, they gave me clarity. All these years I had been fighting for things that didn't matter. The legacy, the inheritance, it had all been built on lies. But now I understood. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about my life, my peace, and reclaiming my worth. I'm done, I said, shaking my head. It's over. With the truth finally laid bare, I moved forward. I didn't need to look back anymore. Armed with everything I knew, I took the next step. I went to the law office, sat down, and signed the papers that would sever my ties to everything: my father, the family business, and the toxic life they had tried to keep me in. "I'm not here for a handout," I said firmly as the lawyer handed me the documents. "I'm here to take back what's always been mine." This wasn't just about legal victories. It was about finding my voice, asserting my independence, and standing up to a family that had tried to control me for too long. The victory was mine, and soon the world would know it. I wasn't just Tracy anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. As my legal battle unfolded, the ripple effects began. News of my victory spread fast, and people in the family business who had once dismissed me as weak now began to take notice. The power dynamic was shifting, and I was at the center of it. The world saw me for who I truly was, a woman who had been through hell and come out stronger. But even as I stood victorious, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my sister, the one person I had been at odds with the most. She had been part of the betrayal, siding with our father, but now she was reaching out. "I can't erase the past, Tracy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I can choose how we move forward. It's not about forgetting, it's about healing." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hear her out. We talked about the past, the choices we'd made, and the pain we had both endured. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a new beginning. We weren't done yet, but we could start to heal. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for redemption. The last battle wasn't won in court. It came with a final confrontation, one last test of my resolve. My father's associates, the ones who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, were still trying to destroy me, but I was ready. I stood tall in that final meeting with the evidence of their corruption laid out before me. "You thought you could break me," I said, meeting the top associate's cold eyes. "But you've only made me stronger." The legal victory was mine, but more importantly, it exposed a network of deceit that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The family fortune was built on lies, and now the truth was out. My name was cleared, and my future was secured. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of everything I had been through began to lift. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like freedom. It felt like redemption. I stood on the threshold of my new life, looking out at the horizon, the weight of the past slowly drifting away. There was no going back. The door was closed, and a new one was opening in front of me. "I've closed that door," I whispered to myself, the finality of it settling in. "Now it's time to open a new one." And this time, I'm walking through it stronger than ever. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and walked into the future I had fought for, knowing that the past would no longer define me.